Hi, everyone. Welcome to Dean's Chat, where we discuss all things podiatric medicine. My name is Dr. Jeffrey Jensen. I'm the Dean at the Arizona College of Podiatric Medicine and the co-host for the Dean's Chat podcast. As always, I'm with my co-host, Dr. Johanna Richey. Hi, Joe.
Hey, Jeff. How you doing?
I'm doing fabulous. I'm really excited about our episode today because we're going to talk about Dean's Chat, the past, the present, and the future.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I thought I'd start out by talking about a walk down memory lane, and we'll be discussing the inception of Dean's Chat. It's been going for 16 months now. But first and foremost, I just wanted to shout out to all of our listeners on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. As you and I were discussing yesterday, we're a top 10% podcast in the world, and there's almost 4 million podcasts. So we're making our way. We're getting out there, and people are listening. And the other funny stat, Joe, that I saw was our YouTube videos, our long form videos, just cracked 200,000 views, and that's not bad for 125 videos. So.
Oh man!
So I'm so thankful.
It's so remarkable, right? It's such a humbling experience to hear you say numbers like that, because it feels so casual to talk to you in a computer screen, and you just forget how wide that reach potentially can get. How did you come up with all of this in the beginning, Jeff? If we were to really go all the way back to the beginning, what were some of the kind of inciting thoughts behind starting the podcast?
Well, I did an episode as a guest on a podcast, and I thought to myself, this would be really neat. I know so many fascinating people in podiatric medicine, and it also happened at a time when we were trying to give it extensive exposure to podiatric medicine, looking at applicant pools and increasing the visibility of podiatry. And so this is kind of funny, Joe. I took the back of a piece of paper and I said, if I signed up for a year of podcasts or 52 podcasts, could I write down 52 names? It took me like 5 minutes, and I had 52 people that are really leaders in our profession, whether they're fellowship directors, residency directors, people in like APMA leadership, ACFAS, ABPM. I just went through all my friends, and I thought, oh my gosh, this would be easy to do. And all of a sudden, next thing you know, I was signing up for podcasts, and I'll never forget my first podcast. Dr. Stephanie Wu was kind enough to join me, and I was super nervous. And I remember driving down here trying to memorize all the beginning and the end, and because it's different than giving a lecture at a meeting, because everything that we put out is evergreen, if you will. It means it's going to be there forever for people to listen to. So I have to admit, I was kind of nervous. I don't know if you felt nervous when we started doing this.
Oh, huge. Yeah. I still kind of get nervous in full transparency. I'm grateful that it's casual through a screen like this, but
well, it was also interesting because I figured I didn't want people to think that this was an Arizona College of Podiatric Medicine effort. So I made a very conscientious decision to bring in the deans from all the colleges. I wanted to bring in students from all the colleges. We've interviewed faculty from all the colleges. So I was really trying to make it an all-inclusive experience for podiatric medicine. And then I'll never forget the day you said to me in the office, Jeff, Dr. Schuberth and Dr. Ruck might want to come on our podcast. And I thought, oh my gosh, that'd be great. But I said, I'm only doing it if you co-host with me, Joe.
And it's funny how timing sometimes. We had just completed one of the AO basic courses, and Dr. Rook had given a lunchtime talk about the history that he had kind of witnessed through his father's practice and then his own experience and, in the latter half of his career. And I just sat there and I was just so fascinated. And what I had loved about your podcast was learning so much of the history of our profession. And I mean, what a gift to be able to capture that. And so as I was listening to him talk, I'm like, oh, I'm sure he would go on and talk with you. And then certainly just my own experience with Dr. Schuberth, knowing some of his, watching a history of and actually impacting the history of a profession as well. So when you had said that, it was, again, that moment of vulnerability, right? Like, oh, I don't really want to be like a spotlight celebrity person, but here we are. 200,000 views. That's amazing.
Absolutely. And like you said, it just feels like a fireside chat, and that's what it's supposed to be, right? And let's just take a broad stroke here about our guests. They've been unbelievable. I mean, everybody's come on and they've talked about their careers, and they've been so humble. We've had to kind of pull some of their the accolades out of them sometimes, but oh my gosh, what an incredible guest list and profession we have.
Absolutely. And I think that's really the mark of the success here. I think what people are really tuning into and the interest that you've generated is the human stories, the way that we connect with each other and having the moment to learn about each other in ways that isn't just how do you treat X, Y, or Z. And not that there's anything wrong with that. I mean, we all go to conferences and want to pay to hear how people make their decision making and look at case presentations, but it's a really unique opportunity to kind of go to the other side of the human component of what we do. And I'm humbled by the opportunity to meet all of these incredible people. I mean, again, what a gift our profession is to so many interesting people and innovators and thought leaders. I mean, it's just really remarkable.
Well, I think it's great that you and I sat down over the last couple of days and we looked at all of the episodes, and each of us picked a few that we'd like to talk about. And then we agreed at the end, there's 3 that we want to specifically highlight as probably the most talked about, the most impactful, the most kind of almost emotional stories. So why don't we get started? That's kind of a fun trip down memory lane. I don't mind kicking it off. I mean, I'll never forget. I want to talk about Dr. Stephanie Wu. I've always admired Stephanie. We wrote papers together for diabetes care in the past, and she's so humble, and she's such a tremendous leader, and she's a role model, and she's a researcher, and she's a lecturer. And bringing her on the podcast was incredible because I learned a lot about her that I did not know. And really, it started highlighting the need for mentorship. It started highlighting the need for really doing great residency programs. So a lot of good things going on there. And I'm always thankful to Stephanie for being my guinea pig on the show.
Absolutely. And, it's also been fun as we kind of have the opportunity to first and foremost interview people and then also listen back. And there are some common themes that are neat to watch reflected through multiple interviews. And when you talk about your interview with Dr. Wu, which was phenomenal, it also brings to mind Dr.Tim Yoho, another dean, right? Even though now retired, and just the beautiful story, the personal story that he had about some of the decisions about why he did at that phase of life decide to retire. Again, I was so touched by that story. And then to go on and talk about, being a leader in kind of combining the podiatric medical education with the osteopathic school and talking about the leadership skills that come with those kinds of challenges and navigating. I loved his statement, and I've quoted it several times now, the path to acceptance is excellence. And the fact that he really mirrored that and used that as a framework to forge that career and, build those bridges, I just think was outstanding. And then I loved his talk too about finesse and this idea, you're trying to get stuff off the ground and, we all hit roadblocks or obstacles. And it's not that these are bad things. Sometimes they're bad, but sometimes it just requires creativity and persistence and being able to bridge those gaps. And finesse was a wonderful word that he highlighted. So I really enjoyed that interview as well.
And of course, his story about his son and his granddaughter.
Yeah.
He's just an incredible person. And he took the time to write that beautiful book. So hats off to Tim. I was looking back and I noticed episode 27, Dr. Peter Highlander and Dr. Calvin Rushing. They were 2 students of mine at Barry University, and they're brilliant. And I knew they were going to be great practitioners and leaders in the field, but they went on to big residency programs. They did fellowship training. They also are fellowship directors in Peter's case. They've invented things. They've done a lot of great things, and they really represent the future of our profession, Joe. And those kind of students are everywhere, but that was just a tremendous moment for me interviewing them because I'm so proud of them.
Absolutely. And again, this idea of innovators and thought leaders and people that have been willing to harness opportunity when, not crisis, but maybe crisis, or even just, changes that happen, different phases of life. Dr. Paul Kim talked a lot about phases of a career, phases of life. Matt Cobb and Haywan Chiu, the Surgical Academy. I mean, you talk about innovation, right? You take something where it's like, we want to be able to give back in this period where we're not able to be in physical proximity. So let's find other ways to interact and engage and teach and create an opportunity now to help so many different students and residents and even possibly surgeons that are wanting to look at different videos and learn new skills. The talent, and again, in this profession and creativity, curiosity, I think it's just outstanding.
It is. And, we started to talk about work-life balance, and we did some interviews with people who they're in podiatric medicine, they're working with residencies, but they also have other passions, right? So in episode 46, my friend Brad Ruetenik came on and talked about racing sailboats all over the world. He done trans-Pacific larger sailboats from LA to Hawaii, but he also races internationally 14-foot boats. And it was interesting because at the end of our interview, he said, I'm training the next generation of podiatrists, but I'm training the next generation of Olympic sailors because the Olympics is coming to Los Angeles. So it really highlights, again, the talent in our profession and the willingness and the willingness to go out and help other people. And once you've established yourself, it never ceases to amaze me. So that was a great episode.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, just learning interesting things about people. We had a fellow classmate of mine, Jamie Mieras. And it was funny when I reached out to Jamie originally, I think she was a little hesitant. Like, I'm not a thought leader in the industry. And her episode has actually been one of the most popular ones, and one that I've gotten so much amazing feedback from listeners and people that her story just really resonates with them. And we'll put all of these episodes in the show notes if people want to find them and listen back or listen for the first time. But her story, being an ultra marathoner and so many of the analogies that you can draw from what she had talked about through training for those kinds of runs and the preparedness and mental acuity that you have to, craft in order to just be able to get through it. And then translating that into, life analogies and at the same time, then the fact that she was a pilot, that she went through all that and got her pilot's license. Again, I had no idea. Out of everything that I knew about Jamie, I did not know that. And it's just, man, it just makes you just swell with enthusiasm what people are doing with their life.
No doubt. One of the best conversations I had, and it actually got fairly technical, which wasn't really common on Dean's Chapel, was with Dr. Mike King, the Chief Medical Officer of Upperline. We talked about accountable care organizations. We talked about at-risk populations. We talked about the forming of a supergroup at Upperline. Mike King is brilliant, and I so enjoyed that conversation. And, he's a past APMA president, so he's been around the block and then some. So we had just had so many good discussions about managed care and patient care in the future. Kudos to Mike. It was a great interview.
Absolutely. And again, it's another one of those, it's just so fun. I mean, I think we could probably sit and talk about this all day, but as you're saying certain things, I'm reminded of other interviews and, talking with Jeff Baker and the Balance Health merger that had happened. And it's fun to, again, get to know the human side of people, be able to have social type interviews, but at the same time, you get to learn so much about the structure and the organization. And he also talked a lot about the ACFAS organization and the structure there, as he has a lot of leadership, even new leadership opportunities that he's been engaged in. And so just being able to pull some of those nuances out as you talk with people. Another one that was actually very technical, but still very interesting, and actually someone that I've really enjoyed kind of getting to know virtually online now, was Jim MacDannald. Another just incredible story of podiatrist that has also a whole nother set of unique skills and talents and has transitioned into being able to use his expertise as a podiatric physician to also branch into a whole nother career in terms of marketing and search engine optimization and web analytics. And again, there were some very technical things that you two talked about, but hearing that human side, and I loved, he said a couple of different things, and I know I will misquote him. And then now I've read some of his, work as well. So I might be merging two of the things. But what I loved the most about some of the comments he's made is this idea that we shouldn't be afraid of embracing these other sides of ourselves, we go through, I mean, he had excellent training, and it's not an abandonment of the training and skill that you've cultivated if you choose to move into new areas of opportunity. It's really the natural progression of a career. And Paul Kim also kind of alluded to some of these concepts. And I really appreciated that, because it's so easy to get kind of pigeonholed and stuck in, this is the path, and you stay on this path from now until whenever you retire. And, the reality is, as we've listened to so many people talk, no one's path is that way, or at least none of the really interesting people, right? It's all kinds of interesting connections and navigations and interactions with different people, and taking areas from one field or one area of your life and merging them into new ones. And I just love hearing so many different creative people and their innovations and what they're doing. It's just remarkable.
To emphasize how small the field is, Jim was a student, and he rotated through my clinic when we had a residency in Colorado. But then we flip the coin and we talk about leaders like Randy Kapland.
Yeah.
I mean, talking about how podiatry got into Medicare with a cigarette box full of $10,000, bribing a senator. I mean, just unbelievable. And Alan Jacobs, another product of Kern, who I'll never forget him telling the story of how he broke open the St. Louis market for podiatrists in hospitals because he was excellent. He was good. He had high expectations. He had good training, and he was training other people. Our profession just is it's young, but then it's young, but it's old enough to make a difference.
Yeah, and if that's actually a beautiful segue. If you don't mind me starting to go into maybe our not top three, that makes it sound like we're ranking interviews, and we're absolutely not doing that. But in terms of one of the interviews that I personally now have listened to about 3 times, because there are so many little gems in, and I have never met Dr. Hanft, Jason Hanft, but I loved the interview the first time I heard it, and I had to listen to it again because that's just the way that my brain works. And then listening to it again recently in preparation for today, and it's fun. Each time I've listened, I'll pull something different out. And when you talk about just like the legacy of excellence and not being willing to just accept the status quo. And he had talked a lot about mentorship, which has definitely also been a very common theme through all of these different interviews. But one of the things I appreciated so much is he even got a little emotional speaking of his mentors, which again just goes to show that lasting impression that we can leave on each other. And the fact that Dr. Keith Kashik had made such a huge impact in his life, and how he talked about those even from when he was like 9 years old. But then as he talked about as a student, seeing a patient with a diabetic ulcer, and that throughout his training, that patient never really healed. And he was like, we are missing something. We need to do a better job, and just not accepting that, well, this is just the standard of care, like pursuing that passion and then taking that to the next level of, I can make a daily impact here in a clinic seeing patients, and the challenge of I have an opportunity to do something different that could impact more lives on a grander scale. But it does mean there are trade-offs, and listening to him discuss all of that. Oh, I just so appreciated his insight and his wisdom. And so now I want to go meet all of these people. So we'll have to have like an in-person, an IRL next year when ACFAS is here in Arizona. Maybe we can get people together for an actual meet and greet.
Oh my gosh, that's a great idea. It would be a fun thing.
Yeah.
So Dr. Hanft's episode was interesting because he had a lightning storm put out his cable halfway through our first interview. So we had to piece them together, but it actually gave Jason and I a chance to, contemplate and ask some new questions and go down different directions. Jason and I are good friends. We got to know each other real well in Miami. We've done a lot of different things together, even entrepreneurially. But he's brilliant, and I love working with Jason. And I, like you, have had tremendous responses. Things like I had to listen to Jason's 3 times, and I'd listen to it more, people would say. So I thought it was awesome. So kudos to Jason. How about the next one? I'll bring it up. I was one of the guests that you introduced, one of your mentors, Dr. Jack Schuberth. It was the only time, Joe, when I was doing an interview that I forgot I was the host. I was so immersed in Dr. Schuberth's story and his discussions and the fact he's done 1,600 total ankle implants. And he was talking about the iterations of the implants and what it was like to take on some of these very difficult cases and what it was like to publish results that were less than optimal. I mean, all of that discussion was very heady. It was very mature. And I can see why he was such a leader. But to be honest with you, I've seen Jack lecture a bunch of times. I was kind of afraid of Jack. I was afraid to come up and ask him a question. But you worked with him as a resident.
Well, and I did, and you know, when I was there in San Francisco for residency, you know, there are certain people that you just kind of connect with, and he was one of those doctors that I think, myself included, a lot of people are a little intimidated by, and he comes across as a very rough South Side of Chicago guy, but honestly, out of so many amazing faculty that we have at our program that I graduated from, he took so much care and empathy and compassion for his patients that I was a little surprised. Like, it was just not quite what I had expected on that exterior. And that's where, as soon as you get to know him, you actually start to realize that really truly is Jack Schuberth, is actually this amazing human being who is compassionate and kind and caring. He's just wrapped in the South Chicago guy that, you know, just is a little bit more gruff, perhaps. So I was thrilled that side of him, I think, actually really got to come out and have an opportunity for people to see that side, and the vulnerability of him being so willing to talk about all the things you just mentioned, and certainly about one of our mutual patients that had a huge impact on his life, and also possibly one of the reasons that he and I became, you know, kind of close as a resident and mentor, was, you know, going through that experience with her was, I mean, it impacted both of our lives, and, you know, we will never forget her and the I don't want to say lessons that she taught us, but, you know, for lack of a better statement, I mean, that is medicine right there, right? Like those moments of humanity, and to hear someone talk about them in full transparency the way that he did. Wow, that was remarkable.
True icon in our profession.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, let's talk about the last one. You want me to kick it off?
Speaking of vulnerable and transparency.
Yes. Oh my gosh. So the most kind of intense 10 minutes of Dean's Chat was the first 10 minutes of my interview with Mario Cala, episode 31. You know, I knew some of the stories because I hired him in Miami to come on to faculty. And, you know, the stories of being thrown in jail in Cuba and being accused of sabotaging his equipment as a dentist and being relegated to an outside area where he was the only dentist for 100,000 people, but he didn't have enough equipment. He didn't have sterilization capabilities. It was amazing. And then his grit and his perseverance and his diligence to come to the United States, they didn't want to let him go. And when they finally did, his emotions when he came to the United States were unreal. And not to mention the fact he didn't speak English. And he learned English.
And then to go into a professional program in a very short period of time, absolutely.
And to humble himself.
Didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, no, that's okay. To humble himself and he was like a janitor at the hospital, knowing he wanted to be a doctor in the United States of America. If the first 10 minutes of episode 31, I think, are the best 10 minutes of Dean's Chat. And so I couldn't help but talk about it. What are your thoughts?
No, I couldn't agree more. I want to say when I started listening, he may have been like the 5th or 6th interview that I had listened to. And I think I actually came right into your office and I'm like, I would love to have his contact information. I mean, just the humility and the kindness of spirit, like to go through what he went through, but to then come out on the other end and be the kind of physician, but even just human being. Like, it's just a remarkable story of human perseverance and just love. Like, you can hear it in his voice when he talks about his training and his patience and the opportunities that he has had here. And just, like, I'm getting goosebumps just talking about it, because it's the kind of story that just resonates, that I have never had a fraction of the experience that he has.
Right.
But, you know, you have these little moments where you're like, well, this was something that I experienced and it was really hard. And then you hear that and you're like, wow, like the fact that you have so much love to give to your patients despite all of those circumstances, and that you just keep pushing forward is just a remarkable story.
Yeah, and he's married, has some 3 beautiful kids, and I love the end. His friend wanted to meet with his son and tell him the trials and tribulations that Mario's gone through. Because, your kids don't really appreciate that usually. I just thought that was a cool story. So, yeah,
they still might not, but.
Well, they still might not, but they will someday. So that's kind of a whirlwind. We didn't talk about every episode, and there were so many awesome episodes.
So many, yeah.
So, anyways,
I'm sure we've forgotten a lot of really great ones.
Our plan, right, is to do 100 more episodes this year. We do them on Tuesdays and Fridays, and maybe it's a good time to talk about some of the changes that we're going to have at Dean's Chat starting July 1st.
Absolutely.
So we are honored.
What you got in the works, Jeff?
Well, Joe and I are honored to bring on Bako Diagnostics as a presenting sponsor for our Tuesday episodes. I've worked with Bako for many years in the academic realm, and I've worked with the Bako Medical Education Foundation. They've been so generous, Joe. They've given so much to our profession from an educational perspective, not only for students and residents, but for practitioners. And so I'm just so excited to have them be part of Dean's Chat, and I know you've had some personal experiences with them also.
Yeah, I agree. Having this opportunity, I think, is a really unique and wonderful way to kind of grow. I know there are a lot of things you and I are hoping to continue to kind of develop for the community, and having this opportunity to kind of collaborate with Bako, I think, is a really unique one. What I appreciate so much about Bako is anytime you go to any CME event, they have invested so much in our profession, really in a specific niche, even in terms of dermatopathology. But it goes even bigger than that. My training was primarily surgical, and we really didn't see a lot of dermatopathology because a lot of it in the system that I worked in was sent to the dermatology department, and they would do biopsies and take care of patients appropriately from there, and then send it to us if there was something that required a surgical intervention. But, you go and you leave a system like that and you go into a different practice setting, and suddenly now you're tasked with the patient walking in the door. And it's an important point, I think, to recognize that, as much as you can be technically skilled at doing a surgery, those workups for patients in that initial stage of, when do you biopsy something? How do you biopsy? What kind of biopsy? And then having the support. And it's not just biopsy stuff that they support with, but having the support in terms of the readouts that the pathologists will actually give in their reports were so fantastic. And I just was really impressed overall with their system that they had. My partner actually was much more well-versed. I actually had to shadow her because I just, again, in full transparency and willingness to be a lifelong learner, and the humility to say, I'm not as familiar with what to do in some of these kind of situations. Can I follow you around a little bit? And she was gracious enough to give a little giggle, and she's like, yeah, sure. So she had done the mini fellowship that Bako has available to residents, and she talked so highly about how that was really impactful for her and how it really helped her, form not just workups of patients, but then also, from workup to treatment. And so I really appreciated that, in terms of some of the feedback that she had given. Then started to carry that into my own practice. So I'm now a advocate for more opportunities like that to have these growth. You have a period, and some of our guests have talked about that too. You have a period where maybe there's a part of your skills that are either kind of atrophying a little bit, or they just never really existed, and you're trying to learn something new, and being willing to raise your hand and say, hey, can I get some help with this? And they have been remarkable as an organization to really invest in us, to support us in that niche.
Yeah,
so
very
I'm grateful.
I'm grateful too. You took the word right out of my mouth. When I think about Bako and I think about diagnostic testing, what the mind doesn't know, the eyes can't see. So if you're not aware, if you're not looking for specific things, you're going to miss it. So they bring a lot to the table for practicing docs all over the country, and we're going to help spread the word.
Absolutely.
Oh, and kudos to Shauna Shapiro, of course, and Elizabeth Campbell. Just wonderful, wonderful people. And we've enjoyed working with them, and it should be a great year. We're we're all going to have a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a lot of fun. I know we've got some really awesome guests lined up. I'm really excited about some that we've already done that haven't been released, along with some that we have upcoming. It's gaining traction, which is just a really exciting opportunity.
Joe, maybe something we should talk about real quick before we end is the reason we do 2 podcasts a week.
Sure.
When I started out, I thought one podcast was plenty and it was great. But then I realized in this small podiatric profession, and maybe we have an encatchment of 25,000 people, there's all these little niches, right? There's pre-meds, there's students, there's residents, there's fellows, there's young practitioners, there's leaders in the profession, there's all the organizations. I mean, there's an unlimited supply of people that we can interview and learn from. I mean, it's just unbelievable. Yeah. So back probably last summer, I interfaced with the American Podiatric Medical Students Association and got permission to interview their representatives at each of the colleges of podiatric medicine. So I started putting out Friday episodes as bonus episodes. And then after we did, all the colleges, I thought, well, heck, let's just keep doing it. I mean, we've got all these different avenues. And so many people have come to me and said, Jeff, we love the fact that you're not doing, treatment of plantar fasciitis or something, or new bunion procedures. But they say, I only listen to maybe 1 or 2 out of 3 because they're not all pertinent to my life. So we're trying to fill that gap with 2 a week, and we'll keep doing that.
Absolutely. And again, it's one of those, there's something out there for everyone. So absolutely.
Well, Joe, thanks for joining today. I mean, trip down memory lane. It was an incredible year. To be honest with you, Joe, the podcast took off after you joined and started bringing guests. And I think when people tune in on the radio on the way to work, or they listen to Spotify, they're probably thinking, oh, I can't wait to listen to Joe.
I don't know about that.
Joe and Jeff.
I will say, it's just one of those things that once it starts to gain traction, again, I'm going to throw all the credit to our guests. I think we've had some amazing people that have just been so honest about their life and being willing to just have that vulnerability and connect, even though it's virtual and it's through a podcast. I mean, I'm just so humbled by the response of our audience. I'm so grateful that people are interested. The feedback, I know you and I have both received emails, and it just really touches your heart for someone to take the time out of their day to say, hey, you know what, I really appreciated this, or you know what, I was struggling with something and this actually really resonated with me. So thank you for just making me feel like I wasn't the only one, or I'm not alone, or I was just really interested to hear this part of the history, whatever it was. And I know the students really enjoy it. They really do. And so again, if nothing else, like at this focus part of my career, just doing things that I can to support them. It's just a lot of gratitude and humility right now. So
absolutely. And thank you to the listeners and the guests, as you said. So Joe, we can close at this point. Do you have any final words, or are you good?
No, I guess my last gratitude would be to you, Jeff. Thanks for starting this. And I know a lot of people have mirrored that, like, oh, this was a really great thing. And it sometimes just takes someone to take the step, jump. And I appreciate you taking that initiative. And it's a wonderful opportunity for the profession. So thank you.
Well, I started it with a little trepidation, You never know how things are going to work, but I'm glad it's worked out well, and we'll keep the train on the track. How's that sound?
Absolutely.
All right. To all of our listeners out there on Spotify and Apple, please give us a 5-star rating. We so appreciate you tuning in each week. And to all of our subscribers on YouTube, we appreciate you watching all the videos. And we can't believe it that people come back and say, I watched that 3 times. I mean, I can't believe that sometimes. So thank you for doing that. And as always, we're going to send all of our guests the Dean's Chat Cup. And it's kind of become a tradition. And so until next week, and we're kicking off a new year. Happy New Year to everybody in July. Cheers.
The academic year. Yeah.
There you
Cheers.
go. Okay. Bye-bye now.